Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Petri Dish. Today, I'm very happy to welcome our guest, Stephen Rose, who's a modern work and AI consultant. Many of you may know him from his days at Microsoft. Hi, Stephen. How are you today?
I'm great, Russell. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Now, let's dive straight in because Microsoft had a big announcement last week about
Yeah,
Copilot and their Spring Wave 2 set of features, which I think are going to be starting to roll out to commercial customers during May. So one of the things that caught my eye was this updated AI search experience that they're bringing to. Of course, we're talking here about Microsoft 365 Copilot. So it's an updated AI search experience, but at least in the last year or so, we've always been able to search within Copilot using natural language.
right.
So what's different about this new search feature or the updates they're bringing to it?
Yeah, I think the key aspects are people are realizing that searching with an AI tool is very, very different than going out to the web and searching. You're not going to get prioritized responses. It's not who pays the most amount of money. It's going to take a look at that. And I think Microsoft's big push is, hey, rather than going out and using Google or even Bing or this and that, this is really the way you want to go. And secondary, that you're looking both at internal and external information and really pulling the best from this. Their goal is to get rid of the button at the bottom of Windows that says search and really have that do that. I think from a consumer standpoint, there was some information that came out last week that on the consumer side, they're only seeing about 20 million users using the Copilot for consumer tool, as opposed to the 400 million that are using it monthly, that are using ChatGPT monthly. So I think
So,
that's
so, so when you say
another
the consumer tool, does that mean Copilot Pro or
Copilot,
the free?
Copilot in, yeah, the version in Windows 11 and Pro. It does mean
Right.
both those,
Okay.
but the
Okay.
version that
Okay.
is geared towards consumers, that's just Copilot Web, not the Copilot Chat internal.
Okay.
um, yeah, that they're not seeing the amount of uptake there that they would like to. So I think their big aspect is going to be, how do we better integrate that into the operating system, make that easier for people to be able to work with and find, and to go ahead and provide more depth, and then adding more functionality like this researcher and analyst functionality. The notebook, I think, are going to be big things on both sides of that to help move that forward further.
Okay. All right. So, is it? I've always thought it was a little bit confusing because on the consumer version, you seem, or maybe I'm getting this the wrong way around. You have the ability to search either the web or work. Well, like, obviously that's the work
Right.
version. But is there doesn't always seem to be this clear difference between what it is that you're searching. So is it
Right.
you can have a combined experience, or is it always
It's more of a
separated? Or
combined experience for
right.
consumers. For business, it is still gonna be now what they call Copilot Chat, which is internal search, versus Copilot Web, which is basically going out to ChatGPT. The only difference between going to ChatGPT yourself and using Copilot Web is Copilot Web, first of all, is encrypted. So that's the first thing. And second, it's not training the ChatGPT LLM. It is keeping all your data secure and doing that. That's what's great. That's if you're using the Copilot Pro or you're using the M365 version of Copilot. If you're just using just the unpaid Windows 11 Copilot tool, then yeah, you're going to be training the LLM and it's not encrypted. That's one of the
Right.
advantages of paying that $20 a month and using Pro if you want to keep
Right.
that information secure.
Right. Got it. Got it. So one of the other big announcements was two new agents. So agents are not
Yeah.
new. Maybe you could just explain a little bit about what is an agent exactly before we go further.
Yeah, there's a bunch of new buttons that have showed up that many people may have seen when they're in Outlook, the new Outlook, or if they're in Teams. There's going to be a prompts button, there's going to be an agents button. And when you click the agents button, you're able to see things like, the some of the tools that will help you write better and speak better and ask questions better. But what people are building out is add ons or connectors. It's a way for you to be able to connect with your own data if you're using SAP or Confluence or Jira or any one of those, that those can be connected to it, or it's a bunch of additional tools that you can use that are created either by Microsoft or by third parties. And they allow you to do things that are better and deeper, like writing coach or speaking coach or big ones, where you can jump into writing coach and you can drop in something that you've written and you can say, hey, make this sound better, or change my tone, and but it will give you those suggestions. You and I have talked about this. The biggest issue that most people have with Copilot is a lack of prompts, a lack of awareness to tell an end user, hi, you have things that you can do here that would help, that there's kind of like a clippy, and that isn't really there to help you. So this is really that step, and by bringing in researcher and analytics, it's another additional feature that you'll see that you can bring in at no extra cost, that is great in specific scenarios to help you dig in much deeper than you normally could and give you a different prompt and guiding process to help you get the most out of that information, depending on what you're looking at.
Right. So if I understood correctly, you could do this stuff without these agents if you could get the
Yeah,
prompt right. Yeah. It's just
correct.
really a kind of a customized system to help people
Right.
really, get the results that they're looking for, if I understood
Right.
correctly.
When we're looking at researcher, for example, something, the ability to do what's called multi-step research, and what that is you can add a variety of information. And what's great is with for the Copilot M365 customers, you can actually look at your own data, internal work data, as well as web data, and start to bring that through and have multi-step saying, "Hi, find me all of the papers that talk about DNA, whatever, and then go through those papers and find ones that were written this, match it up against our own internal data that we have." So you can do these sort of multi step prompts that allow you to not just go wide, but go deep and use both internal and external data. And then you can also now integrate it with your own external data sources. So you can do things like Salesforce or ServiceNow or Jira or whatever it is that you want to do to add additional insights to that. And then you can leverage some of the new AI models that support orchestration and what they call now deep search capabilities, which is something that ChatGPT announced a while back and then Microsoft brought to market. And it opens up some really interesting use cases that you could use this for.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about the work that you've been doing, because I know that for the last already couple of years now, I guess, is it, you've been
Yeah.
essentially working as an independent consultant in this space. So
Yeah.
are organizations actually adopting this technology? And if they are, at what pace? And is it showing, the return on investment that they might expect?
That's a great question. I think everybody rushed out to go get AI because it was, if you don't get AI, you're going to be behind. And Gartner did some great um, research last year that showed that we went from 20% of companies who were doing something around AI, whether it was just starting to move into et cetera, to 80%. That customers that were going to spend the next 2, 3 years rolling out an AI solution, that we went from about 30% of customers to 70%, change that, went down from 70% waiting like 2, 3 years down to, a very, very small amount. So people have picked that up. The problem that we're seeing is people have rolled out Copilot, and beyond the basics, they're not really using it to its advantage. And the main reason is people like, I don't understand how to use it or
Right,
when to
right.
use it or when to engage. The top 5, 10 scenarios are obvious. I think one of the most valuable ones that for people to, use is the Teams meeting recap feature, which I think is brilliant in how it works. It will not only give you the full transcript, but you can say, look, what are all my action items? And it will tell you, or when was I mentioned, or this and that. And if you miss a meeting, to be able to summarize it. Same with some of the email functionality, things along that line. And people get that. But what they're not getting into is going beyond just summarizing some emails, looking at multiple documents. What we've been doing as a company is taking a step back. The biggest issue that a lot of companies have been having is the information that we're getting from Copilot is not correct. And the reason for that is they often have too much data and too much old data. We really look at it, my partners and I, that if you have more than 3 years worth of data and
Hmm.
um, you should really take a look at removing some of that. If it hasn't been used in the last 18 months and it's more than 3 years older, move it to Azure Cold Storage, because the way that you talked about your products and services 3 years ago is probably very different than the way you do it today. And it's
Hmm.
bringing in information that is not representing what you're trying to do today. Same with email. Anything more than a year old, dump it into Azure Cold Storage. You're going to save a ton of money in doing that. And all of a sudden, the pool of information that Copilot's grabbing from becomes smaller. And then cleaning up, validating the information that you have internally. I still have a lot of clients that have not moved everything into the cloud. I'm working with Takeda Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. I'm working with a finance company in California, a variety, but those seem to be the same things as people just turned it on and didn't do their due diligence internally
Hmm.
first to reduce content, clean up content, make it accurate. They didn't really train people on how to use the tool and when to use the tool, and then how to do the follow ups to get that deeper information. And not all their data was in the cloud. And anything
Right.
that's not in the cloud is going to
Hmm.
have an issue. Or you have people that are, get a document, open it up in a link, and then save a copy. And now you've got 5 copies of the same document. How do you deal with
Right.
that?
Well,
So
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
those sort of,
Mm.
it's all that sort of
Mm.
stuff, and how to better retrain the workers, creating change champions programs and getting people to use that better. And then using teams more as the center of your universe also will help to drive better Copilot usage. So that's really what we've
Hmm.
been focused in on: security, governance, looking at all of that sort of stuff, and
Hmm.
even moving beyond that now.
All right. So I just want to pick up on a couple of things there. So you talked
Yeah.
about premises that are, on premises data that
Yeah.
hasn't been moved into the cloud yet. So I assume that there is no, let's take this as an example, that there's
Yeah.
no connector for SharePoint on premises that allows it to connect into the Microsoft Graph API and for Copilot to see that on premises data. That's not a thing, if I understood
People are
correctly.
building that, but it's not, that's a lot of extra work and a lot of extra time and energy that you're going
Hmm.
to spend. And we tell people it's not just about Copilot being able to pick it up. It's about now having that security. It's turning on labeling, having that data there,
Hmm.
cleaning
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
up, and really getting customers to understand that data that is in the cloud is going to be more secure. It's going to be easier to search and find and
Right,
work with,
right.
whether you're in Teams, et cetera. So it's really taking customers down that path, and it's absolutely in their best interest and much less expensive to maintain and keep secure.
Okay.
But we have had
So you
some
mentioned.
customers create some connectors. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's interesting. Um, so the customer has to create the connector. Microsoft's not providing a connector,
I don't
or
believe
how
so,
does
but I
that
could
work?
be wrong. Yeah, I've
Okay,
not
okay,
seen one, but it doesn't mean
yeah,
that
yeah.
there's not one out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, right.
Um,
I
but
just wondered.
yeah,
I guess that Microsoft don't want to extend all this Copilot stuff to the
no.
on-premises servers,
No,
really.
no, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah, yeah,
looking to
yeah,
kill
yeah.
SharePoint on-prem with that.
Right. Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
yeah,
here's the other thing: the on-prem products that are still out there are not getting the new features and
yeah,
functionality
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
the online ones are. So new
Mm-hmm.
Outlook is going to get all the new Outlook stuff. Teams, the those on-prem versions are not going to be up to date, not going to get it, and you're going to find it very, very difficult to work within
Yeah,
them
yeah, yeah,
as you
yeah.
start to do that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. No, that makes absolute sense. So you mentioned Azure Cold Storage. So
yeah.
a couple of things came into my mind. So I guess it's possible to automate moving data that's more than, let's say, 3 years old into that
Mhm.
storage, or how do customers go about doing that?
There are some different ways that you can do that. You can just take a look at your data, pick things that are older or archived. A lot of folks, again, this
Hmm.
is usually data that's in SharePoint. They go, yeah, these are past projects. And it's really the data that you've kept for compliancy purposes, things like that,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
you can just
Hmm.
pick up
Hmm.
and move. There are tools, yes, that there's the SharePoint migration toolkit and other things that are out there from Microsoft and tons of great third parties where you can automate this and say, yes, after this hasn't been touched for 90 days, it's more than this old, it contains this, go ahead and move it to Azure Cold Storage. The big thing there is you're moving from paying, let's say, 2 cents a megabyte to 0.0002 cents per megabyte. And there is something called Azure Hot Storage. Azure Hot Storage is I can put it there and I can pull it out almost immediately. With Azure Cold Storage, once you put something in cold storage, it can take a little bit of time. I think it's 24 to 48 hours to pull it out and sort of rehydrate it and bring it back into your tenant, but you still have access to it, but you're dramatically reducing your SharePoint Online costs, which is great. And you're reducing the amount of data that Copilot has to search through to find information. And by doing that, increasing the accuracy at the same time. So those are really the benefits. And that really starts to add up. We've had companies who have saved as little as $30,000 a year, and some going up much, much higher, which is more than paid for the services of the companies that have come in to help them to sort of figure that out and get that together. So there's a lot of really good aspects from it.
All right. Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't really know about all that stuff you could do with Azure Hot Storage. So,
Yeah.
one of the other thing that came into my mind when you were talking about cold storage is has there been some kind of pushback from users that, oh, well, I need to be able to search all of my data regardless whether it's 15, 20 years old, and if it goes into cold storage, then they get a bit scared about that. How do you deal with that from a political point of view?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. At that point, what I recommend, and there are a ton of great tools out there, is take a look at the data. And what most companies see is 80 to 90% of data that is currently being accessed, all the files that are being used are files that were created generally within the last 3 to 6 months. There's very, very little that is more than 3 years old that you take a look at. And I think if you take a look at yourself and your own work habits, how often are you going back and looking at work that you've created or that others created that are more than 3 years old? There are some cases in legal and things like that. That becomes very important to be able to find those and be able to use those. In medical, having more than 3 years, but then you look at active patients versus inactive patients, et cetera. But I think when most companies take a look at that, they go, oh, here's a really interesting example. A company I was working with, it went out to ChatGPT, to Copilot and said, hi, make me a list of names of 15 fake employees, because they knew they had it in documents where they created, training personas. And what's interesting is it came back with only white male names. And they realized over the past 3 years, that's not what they had done anymore. They were doing more diverse names, both male, female, a variety of ethnic names, etc. And that wasn't reflective. So what you start to find out is the way you're talking about a product, and it's going to look at what's most used, not necessarily what's most recent. And campaigns you did can override the way that you're talking and even miss specs and miss updates because it's looking at too wide a group. So to keep that information accurate and timely, paring it down the way you would a tree to keep it healthy becomes a really critical way to do that.
Right. So I guess it's kind of having the right tools to show, the right people that actually, this data is not being used, and this is
right.
Why it's
and
not
and then I
relevant
tell
anymore.
people, look at your own life and take a look at last viewed modified, and you'll see your top files all within the last 3 or 4 months, no more than 3 years. Anything over 3 years, you're going to see I've not looked at this in a very, very long time. And those are ones that are worth now storing.
Right. Okay, got it. So while we're on the subject of files and storage, what about oversharing? Because I know this has been a concern for many organizations. So first of all, what does it mean, oversharing, and how does that relate to artificial intelligence?
It's when I start to tell you about really personal things like what I ate. No, just kidding. The first thing I tell people is if you can't see it today, you're not going to see it in Copilot. But where you run into issues is I created a folder 3 years ago. I shared out some content with you, and I never went back and unshared it. So now anything else I've added to that is going to now be shared with you. One of the most important things that I tell customers they can do to keep their data secure is using labeling. And that's something, a feature you have in the E5 SKU where you can set up auto labeling. And basically, it is any of these words or anything, any documents, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, emails, anything that contains this information then gets tagged confidential, internal only, general, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In doing that, you're actually creating better governance around. It makes it much easier to know, first of all, to control sharing internally, externally, and who has access to what, to be able to look those up. And then to go deeper, there are some tools inside of Microsoft's own M365 where you can see what folders at least are shared externally, what's being done there. I've seen some great third party tools that will go in and actually tell you every folder file that's shared. But labeling is going to be your best way to do that, because then you can say, hi, you're trying to put a document that is, or create a folder, but you're putting in confidential, non-confidential. It allows me then to zoom in on that, start to see that, and start to do
Mm-hmm.
some of those diagnostics. So if you have E5, turn on labeling. And if you need to add more unique terms, Microsoft Syntax, like if you're in medical, you can add all your unique medical terms to Syntax to allow labeling to
Mm-hmm.
work better. That also now creates security. As you know, that encryption follows the file. You have ways to call it back,
Mm-hmm.
know who it's been managed with, and just really gives you a deeper security platform. So that's probably one of the best ways to get a good handle on what you're sharing and what you have. But you're going to have to spend some time and dig in and take a look at these folders and probably take a look at some of the files. And there are some automation and tools that you can use, but it's probably one of the first steps once you figure out what you're going to keep, who's got it, who has access to it. And in some
Mm-hmm.
cases, wipe the permissions and put it back. And if it's in Teams, that really reduces a lot of that as well, because now you know who has access to that and doing it. Again, back to that, pushing towards making Teams slash SharePoint sort of the center of your universe will
Mm-hmm.
make that a lot easier.
Okay. So who is using Copilot exactly? Is it just because I have the impression that it's just very large organizations because the licensing is pretty steep, but is that the case, or is it being used by whole, small organizations as well? And what
Yeah,
industries? Could you give us a bit of
I've
insight into
seen,
that?
yeah, I think, and I'm seeing everything from companies with 25 people and up are starting to use it. Not as much in that smaller space. For them, they see the value of having a secure external tool, or a tool, again, to look internal. One of the things that I tell companies, if they're not sure if Copilot's right for them or they want to move forward with it, is just go buy Teams Premium, because Teams Premium has Copilot for Teams in it.
Mm-hmm.
And what's great is you'll get those meeting recaps and all that. If you are unsure, as you have a company that's going to see the value for Copilot, the great thing is Teams Premium, I think, is $12 a month. If you chat with CDW or Microsoft rep and you buy more than 20, 25 licenses, you can usually get that reduced down to, I know customers paying $6, $7 a month. But it's a great way to, first of all, see, is Copilot right and do we see any value in
Mm-hmm.
it? And the
Mm-hmm.
Teams portion of it is probably one of the most valuable. The second one is being able to use it to triage emails. Now, one of the things that I've started doing and that I'm seeing other small businesses do with Copilot actions is creating small, uh, kind of almost like little PowerShell commandlet type things. So I have one that says, go out, take a look at all of my meetings for tomorrow and what I
Mm-hmm.
have, show me all the documents that are connected to whatever that is and what I need to do before. And then
Mm-hmm.
it gives me I have it give me an end of day wrap up. This is your action items from today, what's been done. I have them add them to do or planner, depending on what I'm using. And starting to do things like that is becoming a way where smaller businesses, 200, 300 people, are starting to really see value within it. Yes, it is the large enterprises who are probably, because they have the most resources to
Mm-hmm.
bring in to really make it valuable. And then for them, there's companies out there like Shelf that have tools to manage the words and take a look at what's being used and making sure that the results that come back are accurate. But I'm starting to see more, 250, 500, 1200. One company I worked with was only 120 people, but they're already seeing great value in Copilot
Mm-hmm.
in doing research. Now, with some of the new analytical stuff, I have some small, tax firms with about 300 employees that are really seeing some great stuff in that. And now I also think Copilot notebooks is becoming a really unique and interesting way to do this. The big thing, unfortunately, that they did with this announcement was make only a lot of this available to frontier customers. And I think just a long way around, this
What
is
is
what
it?
will answer.
What is a
Right.
frontier
It,
customer?
yes, I had to look this up. I'm like, it says, hi, this will be available to our frontier program. And I'm like, what?
They talked about frontier firms, but frontier
Yes.
customer was a term that already existed, or what?
I don't know. So I had to look it up. So here's what I found: requirements to be part of Frontier. You have to be an enterprise administrator. You have to have at least 300 active users with E3, E5 business premium subscriptions, and basic compliance requirements already have to be set up. And then it goes through how you go into the admin center, how you can sign an NDA and go. You have to have modern auth, of course, advanced admin privileges in SharePoint, an Azure AD P1 or P2 license, and you have to have the copilot.microsoft.com 443 port clear. That's what gets you into the program, so that if you want to try research and analytics and all this other stuff, because you're going to go, I'm not seeing that show up and I get all the latest stuff. I'm
Oh,
on early ring.
okay.
No, you have to be, yeah, you have to be part of that program. And the fact they have at least 300 active users, I think really tells you this is Microsoft's smallest threshold that they look at for companies kind of that they're
Oh,
working
because
with Copilot, at least
I got
based
the
on that.
impression from last week's announcement that this was going to be available to all commercial customers starting in May, but clearly
No,
that's not the
yeah,
case. Right.
correct. Yeah, the notebook feature will be, that is part of the stuff that will be coming as the Copilot Wave 2 release. The big kickoff for that is going to be the Microsoft 365 conference in Vegas. That's where they'll announce, hi, this is now available starting today or in the next few weeks. But beyond Copilot notebooks, looking at the analytics and researcher feature, those are going to be deeper. And those are the ones that they're going to make part of that, because they want customers to start to use it, see how they're using it, and then be able to go in to learn and other areas or in prompting how to just really use this. And I encourage people, again, if you haven't in the new Outlook, go into your add-ins and you may see prompt and actions. Add those and start to take a look and play with it, because it gives you tons of prompts that Microsoft has created, a way for you to save them, to use them yourself. And you can, of course, save your own prompts once you type something in. You can go up to your original prompt, and if you hover over it, you get a little save ribbon. And if you save that, you'll see that show up in your prompts. And if you want, I'm happy to demo this really quick. And you can also share your prompts with a specific team that you're a member of, for other
Mm-hmm.
members of that team to be able to use. So
Okay. All
that's
right.
that's what they're looking for, I think, is to build up a library of those before they release it to the general public in the insiders ring.
Right, got it. So they also talked about frontier firms, which, as I understood, I don't know whether that's referring to the same thing that you've just described,
Yeah,
but are these companies that are going to be using agents in
right.
combination with real people. And there were, I think, three different stages through which companies would go. Kind of, first of all, the agent would become your assistant,
Right.
and then you would kind of manage the agent, and then you would kind of trust it to go off and do its own thing or something like
Yeah.
that. So, do you see that as being, an accurate description of the way these things are likely to pan out, or?
Yeah, I think we're going back to that. People don't know when to engage with Copilot. And it's so often that I say the Clippy thing, that I even had one made, that there's no Clippy in Copilot. I even have a little Clippy there, but that's the problem. So by creating this and saying, hi, here's my day, and here's how I do my day, the way that you start your day is probably very different than the way I start my day, the way that I prepare for my meetings the night before, whatever. The idea is that if you are doing many of the same actions over and over and over again, why not record those, how to do that, and then train Copilot to go from being an assistant to your personal assistant? At the
Right, right.
core of AI, and this is something I say in all the talks that I do and everything, is AI is a tool to help replace or remove redundant or repetitive work so that you can focus in on the job you were paid for, i.e., I took a long weekend. I went to Arizona to go spend some time with my mother over the weekend. I was out Friday. I was out yesterday. This morning, I had Copilot go in and say, look, summarize any emails from anybody who's in my current client list. Tell me what they need, any ones where there's updates, that it will automatically start to do those things for you. When you sit down and be like, it's going to sadly not go, welcome, Stephen. What would you like to do first? But it's going to get there. But it's going to say, hi, here's some emails that probably require your attention. Here's your meetings today. I've gone ahead and given you a summary recap of the last meeting you had with these folks. You have a call on this. Here's a little bit about the company who's calling you. Being able to do that. And again, that's work that is important, but not worth it's not equal to what I'm being paid
Hmm.
per hour to do.
Yep.
Being able
Yep.
to put that in front of me so then I could analyze it and respond to it and work with it and do work at my level or have employees do work at that level. That's really the key. If I'm paying somebody $80 an hour as a marketing specialist, having them spend an hour reading through emails is not a good use of time. But them
Absolutely.
responding to those and using their skills, that's where the value comes in. And that's what AI does at its core. It's not this magic wand. It's not going to replace people. It's not going to get rid of
Hmm.
jobs. Not true. It could in some areas. We're finding middle managers are who just push paper through are not being seen. We're seeing some help desks that it's becoming automated. So when it gets to them, it's a
Hmm.
higher tier again, worthy
Hmm.
of the value that you're paying for them. And that's really at its core what AI is. And people should think about that framework when they're looking at a tool and how they take a look at AI, no matter who makes the AI product or service.
Right, right. So, I mean, I would trust Copilot to do those things that you talked about, triaging
Mhm.
email and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Would you trust email? Would you trust Copilot, Stephen, to go out and do some deep research or some analysis on a complex set of figures, and then, let's say, make some critical business decisions based on a very large data set?
I would do the first part. I think analytics absolutely does that. I think the new Copilot analytics goes out and it helps you to better understand, things like KPIs and service and finance and marketing and create some custom analytics. It will leverage Viva Insights when looking internally. It will be able to
Hmm.
go out and take raw data and demand and forecast to help you better go, hi, what does the industry look like for the next 6 months on this? And I want you to generate revenue forecasts based on this. And then give me a model that if these parts coming from China go up in price to this, how will that affect us and our biggest competitors?
Hmm.
I wouldn't have it act on it. It is still the human being that I have hired and trust and
Hmm.
paying
Hmm.
money to look at that and then add the human point of view and question it and ask it more questions and dig in before they present it to me. But again, the
Hmm.
amount of time to go out and go do that is huge. And that's where Copilot
Hmm.
Analytics comes in. Mixed with research, you now really have a tool that can go out, grab all of this stuff that lots of it you're never going to find, bring it together so you can start to ask the questions that are important and dig in and further refine and make that content personal and actionable. And that's
I think,
really, I think, the
yeah,
goal.
I think that was for me the key word that you said there was find, because
Yeah.
one of the banes of my
Gather,
life. I mean,
find,
I
yeah.
mean, I don't work in a big organization, as you know, but sometimes trying to find the information that I'm looking for takes so much
Yeah.
time. And of course, in
Right.
a large organization, you may never find what it is that you're looking for, So,
100%.
I guess
Yeah.
something like Copilot, at least in my experience with Copilot, if I, you know, I don't know why it's always been a last option. If I can't find what it is I'm looking for through traditional means, okay, I will ask Copilot in natural language, and pretty much it's always come up with what I was looking for, and that's
Yeah.
great, So
I'll give you an interesting
yeah.
example of how I use Copilot recently. I was going to Budapest to go do a conference. I've never been, always wanted to go. And I went to Copilot and said, hi, I am staying in this hotel. I want you to tell me all of the major things, like a top 10 list of things to see in Budapest. I want you to organize it by distance from my hotel and when they open, and also provide a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 on how I should rank these based on what other folks did. And it went out to
Hmm.
TripAdvisor, went out to all these, and it gave me a beautiful list. It said, you want to go to the castle first. From there, You want to go here. Then you want to go to the zoo and botanical gardens. Then you want to go to this museum. And it was awesome. And it would have taken me a long time to create that and start looking at maps. It did that for me in 4 or 5 minutes.
Yep.
And when I asked some friends of mine from Budapest, I'm like, hi, how would you rank this list? They're like, oh, it's perfect. That's great. That's
Right.
exactly what I would
Yep.
tell someone to go
Yep.
do. Again, the amount of time, you're exactly right, spent to do that and put that together, it did that in moments. And when you start to think about that on a business scale, that really becomes interesting. But you still have got to check the data, where it's getting its data from. It needs that human element, because there's a lot of times I'll say, find the latest data from this year, and it's still giving me stuff from 2023. And I'm like, no 2023. So you
Okay.
got to check, you got to check its homework like it did.
Scary question for you. Do you think we will ever reach a point where the human element to check the data and results that it's bringing back is not required?
Um, I don't know. It's a good question. Part of me says there's always people that are going to add in false information or put things in. There's always human error, and human error, no matter how good the AI is and it learns what you're looking for and how to look for things in that, there's always mistakes. If you type in a question about something that is absolutely factual, I've seen Copilot come up with some of the weirdest answers because it found some odd web page. Like I did one like, what date did Americans first land on the moon? And I got other weird dates that said that this was the date that it was filmed because it really didn't happen. So, what do you do when you have things like that? So that's the problem, is the data is not always correct, which means that Copilot can always be correct. Could it get to that point? I think there's a point where humans will start to trust things like that and go, yeah, it's right 99% of the time, so I'm not going to trust those one outs. But I think it also depends on the scenario it's being used. If you're trying to research how to save somebody's life with some rare disease, you're probably going to want to go back and check your sources
Yeah,
and take a look at that
absolutely.
a little
Yeah,
more deeply.
yeah,
The life and death stuff is important.
yeah, yeah. So you talked a little bit about Copilot notebooks. What is a
Yeah.
Copilot note? Because they were a thing, and then they seem to disappear, then they seem to come back. Is it the same as? Because I've heard, and I've never used it actually. Is it the same as? Does Google in its AI not have some kind of notebook feature? Is it the same thing, or is
Google,
it something different?
it
Or
sort of does, yeah. They talked about notebooks in January, that they were going to be coming. They released it to a lot of the insiders, and they got it, and they had a lot of feedback on it. So they've hold as many products. And I was at Microsoft for 15 years, worked on a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of times that we would do things like A/B testing, push out two different versions of functionality to see which ones people used and didn't. Even when builds come out, especially insider builds, when that insider build goes out, we stop. And if there's a lot of feedback, this is broken or not working as expected, or it's a bad experience, we halt. We would go back and edit and change and then re-roll it out. So just because a feature's GA, as you know, doesn't mean you're going to get it, and it could take time to do that. Well, Copilot Notebooks was one of those. So Copilot Notebooks, and the big thing, my big question was, and it's great. It's a great content aggregation, a great place to sort of put everything. You can then ask it questions on the things that you're keeping as you're kind of going through all of these different information sources. You can have it do things like smart drafting and even do an audio overview that will generate kind of a podcast of this. So if you're doing research, hi, do this, create an audio overview, and then put it here so you can listen to it in your car on the way in the house. It is very similar to Google's Notebook LLM, which allows team members to work more efficiently and get in there. The big difference is about 2 years ago, they released something called shared loop workspaces, where you could take all the stuff you were finding on AI and research and dump it into a single area. But that was built for real time collaboration for multiple users. This is more private for you, but you can share it with people, unlike guest spaces, which was meant for you to share with other people, and as long as you had a OneDrive SharePoint license. So this is more personal in doing that, and a good way for you to gather and aggregate data, create notes, put that together in one place, kind of do a mini research in many ways, or just take your research, simplify it, boil it down, and give it back to you in ways that make sense. And that's great.
All right. That's interesting what you said because I'd heard about Copilot notebooks in the past, but I don't believe I ever
Yeah.
saw them in my tenant. I don't think I ever
No,
had
you didn't.
access to them. And
Yeah.
then
It
they,
came out to some insiders. I
yeah,
never got it.
right,
I know
right,
people who did, and
right,
some
okay.
of the tap customers got it, but then they got a lot of feedback and went, "Nope, it's not ready yet. Let's go back and let's take this feedback," which I think shows a lot about the new Microsoft versus the way Microsoft was 5, 10 years ago, where they would have done it, wait till it got in the wild and have people go, it's not so great, and try to make it better. They're like, we really want it to be the best product that we can. And I think Google did a great job with their Notebook LLM or Notebook LM, whichever it's called. LM? Yeah, Notebook LM, I think is
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
This is how do we do that better or different? And I think that's really the key. So they're not just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
duplicating what someone else has done.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the biggest problem is how Microsoft communicates this stuff. It's like researcher and the analyst agents. They kind of
Yeah.
gave the impression this would be available to everyone come May.
Right.
And maybe it's been the same with the Copilot notebooks when they did talk about it in the past.
Right.
It just seemed like I ought to have access to it, but I didn't, in fact. So,
Right. Yeah, I
yeah,
I
yeah.
think when Jeff Teeper gets on stage at M365, which, is interesting because did you go to Ignite this year? I don't know if you did or
No,
not.
no,
Did you
no,
go last year? Okay. I
no.
did go. Um, I will say this straight out, and this is someone who was a huge part of Ignite. I have no desire to go again because there wasn't any deep dive technical information. There weren't the engineers I wanted to talk to. There weren't the hands on labs. And that's
Right.
something that's been an issue for a while. And that's something where basically two or three groups have said, we're going to do those deep dive tech conferences with the 300 to 400 level content. And the big one that Microsoft has leaned into, and it is not a Microsoft conference, even though they pay a lot of money to be a part of it, is the M365 conference. It's in the spring and
Right.
in the fall. Jeff Teeper, head of engineering, CVP of engineering, oversees that. He's the guy who kind of owns Copilot and Office from that end. Caruana Gatimu, good friend of mine. A lot of great folks are there. A lot of the engineers show up, and that's the show where they'll say this is when it's going to be available and when you can get it. So that'll be part of his keynote. They're going to always hold back a little bit on that, but I love what used to be Educon and now TechCon. They changed the name because people thought it was only for education, and it's not. There's TechCon 365. I'll be speaking at the one in Seattle and the one in Atlanta this year. And the Tech Mentor group of conferences, which is, VS Live and Tech Mentor and all the rest. Those are the ones that I tell IT pros, if you really want to go and hear, especially M365 for the announcements that are important to our audience, that's what they want to look for in dates and when things are going to hit, and the conferences to go to for that deep dive stuff. So yeah, that's really where
Okay,
those things are
great.
at.
Okay, so just wrapping up, if a company is looking
Yeah.
to invest in Copilot, uh, what is what are the first steps they should take? Contact you or, or what
Yeah,
else?
call me. Yeah, no, no.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm at stephenlrose.com, and I'm
yeah.
actually partnering up with some other great people. And we're going to be starting
Okay.
a secondary company called creativeminds.ai that folks will see this summer. But yeah, just type in Stephen L. Rose in your browser, type it in social, LinkedIn, wherever you'll find me. You can see where I'm speaking and what we do. And you guys do a great job. There are so many great educational sources out there. It really is. Read the blogs, have Copilot summarize the blogs and bring that down for you, read it, and then get online and hear what people like you are saying, and of course what Paul Thurrott is saying, and all the rest, to really kind of get those ideas for yourself and understand it before you start to dig in. And that's really the best thing to do, so that you kind of hear all sides of the story, all the ideas, and that you're ready to move forward. And you've done a great job as always, Russell, so I appreciate it. And I watch your stuff, not daily,
Okay.
but I usually watch
Well,
like every third show really strikes me, and I kind of catch that one where I'm like,
oh, okay.
that's really in my zone. And you do a great job. So always a
Okay.
pleasure to
Well,
be here, and keep up the good work.
thank you. Thank you very much for that, Stephen. And of course, we'll put a link to your website in the video
Appreciate
description
it.
below, so you can click on that if you want to find out more about what Stephen is up to. Okay, well, I think that just about wraps it up for today. Thank you very much for your time, Stephen. It was a really interesting conversation, and I'm really happy to see that organizations are starting to embrace this stuff.
Agreed. 100%. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, good luck, all of you, with your Copilot journey. It is just the beginning of all of this, and I'm excited to see how this will continue to evolve across all of the different AI tools that are out there, and every day there's a new one that pops up that does something interesting or unique. So just keep learning. That's
Yeah,
what I tell
yeah, yeah,
folks.
yeah, yeah, of course. Okay, great. So thanks everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.